What is going on, my fellow geeks?
3 movies with elves and a guy with a white beard.
Not a lot of people accept it as canon.
2022 will be the year of Star Wars.
Well, I have more than just one piece of geek news.
I have been Isaac Hunter.
Which is like high culture, but better.
Hello, fellow geeks, and welcome back to Raving Geeks, the weekly pop culture podcast where we talk about all things geeky and geek culture, which is like high culture, but better. My name is Hope Goodero, host of the Raving Geeks podcast, along with my co-host, who will introduce himself in a minute, with our question of the week. If you're just joining us for the first time and you like this episode and want to check out other episodes, you can find them at cm-life.com and any other place that you listen to podcasts like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Just search Central Michigan Life Podcasts Raving Geeks. So it is our second episode of season 8, and we wanted to do a bit of discussion on spinoffs today. So our question of the week is, Carter, what is your favorite spinoff?
My favorite spinoff is, it's kind of tied because one show is kind of a spinoff and kind of not, but my favorite spinoff is The Mandalorian, which is going on for the Star Wars universe. It works as like its own little story, but it also is a nice continuation after episode 6. And I love the characters that they've introduced, like the Mandalorian and Grogu, or Baby Yoda as people like to call him, and just some of the more obscure characters of Star Wars getting more attention in live action. It's really nice to see as a Star Wars fan. And it's also really nice to see as a Star Wars fan, the fan base kind of come together on one show. And it seems like everybody from every corner of that fandom just universally agrees that show is good, which is so refreshing as a Star Wars fan because we are very, very picky about what we like. But my other favorite spinoff is a show called Gotham, which premiered on Fox back in like late 2010s. I think it started like around 2016. And I just have very fond memories watching that show with my dad. And just before going to school the next day on Monday nights, just watching it with him. It's one of my favorite memories. And I was very impressed with them doing the show without Batman, at least for quite a while. They had Bruce Wayne, but they didn't have like the Batman character in it. It was very impressive to see how many character arcs they could adapt properly without using Batman. I was just impressed with the show.
And for that reason, I don't think that Gotham was a spinoff as much as a prequel.
Right.
Trying to set up, just because, they were setting up Bruce Wayne to explain how he became Batman, but then you had Harvey Dent, and you saw how Catwoman, but I can't remember her name, and Bruce met, and Selena Kyle. So I don't know that I would call that one a spinoff as much as a prequel, but
yeah, that's why I had The Mandalorian as my favorite, because I heard some people consider it a spinoff since it didn't really amount to anything with its Batman character, but I can also see it as just like a prequel because it wasn't technically a prequel of anything.
Yeah. I will say my favorite spinoff is, if any of you are watching on YouTube and you recognize the orange paint on the walls of the picture behind me, yes, my favorite spinoff is NCIS. Closely, slowly, possibly being taken over, or a very close second, is the spinoff of the spinoff NCIS, NCIS Hawaii. But I also really like all of the shows that have been filmed in Hawaii, especially of late, because they've been very culturally aware of the island that they are filming on, and they've been trying to show the true culture of Hawaii and the people of Hawaii. But yeah, NCIS, for those of you who thought NCIS was just its own series, it is actually a spinoff of the old show known as JAG. My sister would probably get mad at me for calling JAG old, but I think it was 80s or 90s or early 2000s. Let's see. I can check that real quick. 1995. So yeah, uh, it's old. I'm turning 26 literally in a week, so it's old. We're considering it old. Um, but yeah, so we would love to hear from you guys what your favorite spin-offs are. You can also tell us what you think Gotham is, if you think Gotham is a spin-off or not, what your arguments for or against it are. Or if you have, if you say it's a standalone series or, whatever, we'd love to hear your response. But so now moving into, before we go into our main topic discussion for the week, Carter, do you have any geek news for this week?
Yes, I do. I have quite a bit actually. My first piece of news is that Mark Hamill says he's likely not going to voice the Joker anymore after Kevin Conroy's passing, which makes me kind of sad. I always loved his interpretation of the Joker is the best out of all the Jokers. But if I had to choose like a live action Joker, it'd probably be Heath Ledger. John Williams is getting a documentary directed by Steven Spielberg, and John Williams will be scoring it himself, which is very exciting to hear. Megan 2.0, the sequel to Megan the Killer Doll movie that came out this year, is getting a sequel on January 17th, 2025, which is very exciting because I thought that movie was really, really good. The Penguin series has been described by Matt Reeves as Scarface for the Batman universe, which has me super excited because it's going to be really entertaining to see Colin Farrell's Penguin rise to power. And that's it for, and Cobra Kai has been renewed for a 6th and final season, which is good because the show's kind of run its course, but I'm glad that they're going to end it off on a good note, hopefully.
I will also add that it is kind of ironic. Well, you and I both had that, so I won't do that, but I'll add on to it in the fact that we're doing an episode on spinoffs. And they said when they announced that Cobra Kai is ending with the 6th and final season, that they are going to be having spinoffs of Cobra Kai happening. So, and that they're already kind of on the way is what the creators are hinting. So yeah, I think that is kind of, the slight irony of us talking about it, that pops up for us. Speaking of, okay, so let's see here. Speaking of things that are coming, Marvel Studios Blade film is now going to be starting filming on May 30th of this year. So we get to finally get some more updates on that one. For anyone who is a fan of the Amazon Prime Video show Alex Rider, which is fantastic, although I have not watched season 2 yet because I keep forgetting that it's out. Season 3 production has begun, and Alex is going to be battling the brutal organization known as Scorpia. So they are sticking true to the books, which I am really happy about. When they posted it, there were also a couple, I think, images released from either previous or like stuff that they've done to like set up for filming, when they go and just like take pictures of where they might possibly film. So, but yeah, so I'm super excited for that to come out. I will definitely be watching season 2 before season 3 comes out. I'll be a good geek and make sure I'm caught up before season 3 comes out. Avatar: The Way of Water has become the 2nd highest grossing IMAX release ever. It is closing in on Avengers Endgame to become the highest grossing, but so far it has not taken over Endgame. For fans of the Fast and Furious series, we have who Brian is going to be, not old Brian, played by Paul Walker, who passed away a few years ago, but Brian, Dom Toretto's son, is going to be played by Leo Abelo Perry, who was in the new Cheaper by the Dozen movie with Zach Braff and Gabrielle Union. And so I'm excited to see a little bit older of a Brian, especially because the last Brian was about 4 or 5, I think, in the last movie. For fans of Only Murders in the Building, Meryl Streep is joining for season 3. So this is a very important cast and very well-known cast, with Meryl Streep joining, and then you have Selena Gomez, Steve Martin, and why can I never remember his name? He played Jack Frost in the 3rd Santa Claus movie. Hold on. It is Martin Short. I knew it was Martin, but I kept thinking Scorsese, and I was like, that is not right by any means. So it'll be really interesting to see Meryl Streep in that one.
Mhm.
How I Met Your Father is coming back with season 2, and Megan Rath, who was in Hawaii Five-O in the final seasons and Being Human, she has been added to season 2, and she is going to be a reoccurring character. And then Outlander has been renewed for season 8, which will be its final season. So they have greenlit some other things for Outlander. I think other spin-offs and other stories along the Outlander season. But season 8 will be ending the seasons, unfortunately. For some people, unfortunately. For others, hey, we get to see Sam. I always mess up his last name, so I'm not even gonna try to say it, but we're get to see him in more things outside of Outlander. And then on to some sadder news in the TV world. There are no deaths that I am reporting, but Taylor Kinney, who plays Kelly Severide on Chicago Fire on NBC, is stepping away. Just for a bit. Nothing is confirmed or said for how long his absence is going to be. I don't think it's a like it's not end of contract like the other actors who have left the series, but it is to deal with a personal matter. They don't say what it is, but he has been with the show since the beginning in 2012, so he's been there for 10 years, and I totally understand if he needs to take some time off and deal with his own personal life away from the show and away from any sort of media. I don't think that they're going to kill off Kelly Severide, because if they hadn't killed off Jay Halstead or Lieutenant Matt Casey, then, or I guess he's now captain, if I remember correctly, then they're not going to kill off Severide. And my final bit of news, as I said, my favorite spinoff is NCIS. Well, one of the other spinoffs that came off of the spinoff was NCIS LA, and that is unfortunately coming to an end at the end of this season. So it's currently in the 14th season, and coincidentally, the last episode, the series finale, is going to be on May 14th. Is gonna not only tie up the end of the season, but tie up the entire series. And this is one of CBS's longest running scripted shows, with 322 episodes by the time that it's done. The cast was just told the other day, and they all are very sad about it, very appropriately, because the main characters have all been on it from the beginning. There have been transitions in like the tech department, like behind the scenes, and Hetty also left and everything, but the main team members have been there since the beginning. But they are saying, we're leaving on a high note because of the recent 3-episode crossover between Hawaii and regular NCIS. And it's good to go out on a high note rather than leaving it, when you can't wrap it up or anything. But it is also tied as the 5th longest running CBS scripted series ever, behind Gunsmoke, Lassie, CSI, and Criminal Minds. And only 2 of the shows have aired in the last 50 years. But they've also, like, CSI and Criminal Minds have come back, so they could see a comeback at some point. But I am guessing that because they had to cancel NCIS New Orleans before NCIS Hawaii came on,
Mhm.
and they told us that there was going to be an NCIS Sydney set in Australia, I am guessing that they had to get rid of one of the NCISs in order to get Sydney up in the air officially. That's not confirmed. That's just my thinking. Um, but you're not going to cancel the main series that everything stems from because you have all these crossovers and different things. I mean, they canceled Jag, but also they don't really reference Jag at all in the show. Like, there might be an occasional character that comes back and you're like, oh my gosh, that's that character. But yeah, so that is all of my geek news for the week. Excuse me. So yeah, if we have more between that is super important, we'll make sure to update you guys on our TikTok. Which I will make sure you guys all get our TikTok handle at the end of the episode. But so now on to our geek topic of the week, which of course is spin-offs. There are a lot of spin-offs that happen, and I would like to say that the what we are considering to be spin-offs kind of comes out of the dictionary definition, and we're going to try and keep it to like our favorite and what we know mostly about. But if you guys have other spin-offs that you think that we need to learn more about, go ahead and like leave us a comment anywhere, like on Twitter and stuff, or on YouTube. But so the dictionary definition of a spin-off is that it is to produce something new based on a popular television program, movie, personality, etc. So to start us off, Carter, what do you think makes a spin-off actually work? Like, in order to keep the spin-off and the series going, what do they have to do?
Well, there's a lot of things that go into making TV shows, so like good writing and good directing are obvious parts. I think what the most important part about a spin-off should be is that the character, like, sometimes the character will be introduced in the main show and you make a spin-off of that character. The character's issues must not be resolved in the main show. Like, it's the character should have enough depth in them to carry their own show, and that's personal problems and revelations you might find out about that character. It just has to be interesting for the audience. But it's kind of complicated when it comes to spin-offs. Like, The Mandalorian is based off of, like, it's a spin-off of Star Wars because it has a lot of the main characters in it, but it's based off of a new character with some similar concepts from the movie, which is really hard to pull off. But they do it well. And like for a spin-off show, like, I personally don't like, which is Legends of Tomorrow, which took a bunch of characters from Flash and Green Arrow and made their own show about it. The only problem with it is that it's not that I didn't care about the characters, it's because I wasn't really interested in where they were taking those characters and their problems that they were facing in that show. It didn't interest me.
Well, and I think another problem with Legends of Tomorrow is when you get the different characters that you're like, no, you've been dead, and then all of a sudden they come back and then die again on the main show. And then, like, I think if I remember correctly, Black Canary, Sarah Lance, she died like 3 different times on Arrow, and then all of a sudden she's back again and she's alive. That was my biggest thing. I was like, how many times are you gonna resurrect this character? Now,
Yeah.
granted, I've said that, and then some of you might remember that I'm a fan of Supernatural. They did come back a lot, and I will be honest, I got really annoyed with that at times too. But also how they brought the characters back led into storylines, not just like, oh no, they're alive, haha, we tricked you.
Yeah.
Which is what I felt like a lot of like the Arrow and Arrowverse deaths were like, oh, we tricked you, haha, they're not really dead. But for me, a spinoff, I think, also has to actually like move the story along as well for that character. Because I also think of like some of the books that I've read that like it's a series, but it's not like sequential. I mean, the events might be sequential, but you don't have to read the first book to read the second book. You just might miss out on like who this other character is until you go back. Because like like those characters, they can have their own storyline. You don't need to know about the rest. Another one that I think of is the originals, which is a spinoff of the Vampire Diaries. Because the originals were about the original family of vampires, but then they also had to deal with all of their own things, and then the fact that Klaus was able to produce a kid. Now, granted, that was also they kind of took that off of Twilight series too, where vampires aren't allowed to have kids. Well, technically, the human is pregnant with the vampire baby, so. But it was still in the supernatural realm. So like the characters themselves, like there was that plot line, and then having to deal with the fact of like, okay, well, we're the originals, we technically can't die except for this one thing. Whereas like I feel like the failed part was Legacies, which was based off of Hope Michelson. They tried to make it too teen show and didn't follow like the same legacy or Vampire Diaries and originals like storylines. Like they just made it too chaotic, too fast type thing. But what, in your opinion, also would like, what spin-off have you seen besides Legends of Tomorrow? Because you said that. But if you want to use that again too, that's totally fine. But like, what's one that maybe had a few different seasons, but you wish like had either not been created at all or had a different creator to take it a different way? Like you saw the potential, but it was not utilized.
There's a lot of answers for that question. One was Batwoman for CW. They should have had Batman in the TV show, and that's just a million different things that could have gone differently. But mostly the Kenobi show that they did for Disney Plus, I was satisfied with it, but I was kind of like, damn, I really wanted more. I was not happy with where they took Obi-Wan's character for that show, and they kind of just made him like super depressed, and he didn't really care about anything. And I feel if Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau were head on with that show, they're kind of like running Star Wars right now. And they kind of sidelined that project to Deborah Chow, which is totally okay. I just think that Dave Filoni needed to write some of those episodes, and they kind of let a bunch of random people write it, and it didn't sit well with me. A lot of the cinematography in that show is just ugly. I don't know who the cinematographer was, or the camera director, but it was awful. Like a lot of the scenes that were all dark and murky, and I couldn't see half of the fights that were going on. And the CGI was pretty good. And I liked where they took Obi-Wan's character at the end, but just some of the way, I don't know, just some of the technology that they used for that show I was kind of like, yeah, you should have put Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau on that show because it didn't look the greatest.
I would say, for me, so I said Legacies was one, and I just had another one, and now I can't remember it. So we're gonna go with Legacies for a hot minute. So like my biggest thing with Legacies is, with the originals, they had set up the original family in the Vampire Diary, so they were able to do a little bit more, like they didn't have to explain as much. Whereas I feel like with Legacies, they didn't set up Hope Michelson and the other characters as well. It was just kind of like, oh, by the way, here's all this like amount of students who are just randomly all of a sudden, you know, like, hey, they're supernaturals too. We managed to find them all. Oh, and the Saltzmans are back, and here's the twins that were set up in the Vampire Diaries that you never were told about again until just now. And I remember them also being identical twins in the Vampire Diaries, but then they were more fraternal twins in Legacies. And then there were like a couple other character things that I was like, wait, if you lived in New Orleans, wouldn't you know these people from, why does it seem like you don't actually know them? And like there was a lot of stuff that did not connect. Oh, I remember what other one. So I'll be honest, I loved NCIS New Orleans because I loved how they set it up and everything, and I loved the crossovers. I loved the series itself too, and all the different characters. But it was difficult, I think, for that series as well because actors kept leaving. Can I help you, Loki? Once again, Loki is joining us, but Loki was actually a good spin-off series, so we're not talking about that just yet. But New Orleans, like, you had the first season set it up with a team of 4, like the regular NCIS and all the other NCISs. But then the one team member left after the first season, and then like 2 seasons later, another one left, and then later on in the season, the final one left, and then you just had the head guy who was left. And it was just kind of like, how are you not like keeping these people, and why did they keep leaving? And anytime you saw anything about like them leaving, it wasn't because of the show, it was because of like their own personal reasons. So kind of like Ruby Rose in Batwoman,
Yeah, I didn't like
like how
that.
she left right after the first season. You're like, excuse me.
Hmm.
And so I think that is really hard if you can't maintain a consistent cast. That it's like, okay, well, now we have to come up with this new storyline for some other character and try to bring them into the show and tie them into how they fit elsewhere.
I just didn't understand why they didn't just cancel it. I think it was such a waste of money that could have gone into like the other shows.
For Batwoman, I kind of wish that they had said, okay, scrap this, we're gonna, you know, say this wasn't really how we're starting it, we're gonna find a new way of actually starting it.
Mhm.
And I think if they had found a new way to like start over the series with the new girl, it would have been better.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it would have been more consistent, and then you would have had that like storyline that fits better than just, oh crap, we got to find someone else. Oh, okay, here we go. This is what we're doing now.
Hmm.
She did a good job. I will say they did a relatively good job of it. I think too, because like your point of them not having Batman in
Hmm.
it, I think if they had done like in Supergirl, where maybe she had to team up like once with him or something,
Yeah, it's so
like
funny to me
connected and
how
be like,
it
here,
it's
he does
so
exist.
it's so funny how TV licenses work. They can have Superman on a TV show, but Batman WB restricted to the movie. I always thought that was so foolish of them.
Well, I think that also goes into Warner Brothers and just how smart their management is.
Hmm.
I mean, that should have been our first red flag, right? You know?
Yeah.
And then the fact too of, why are the CW shows better than the movies, and why can they keep a consistent universe and you can't?
Right. But even the CW universe kind of ran into some trouble, especially after Crisis in Infinite Earths and the whole
Yeah.
Batman situation and Legends of Tomorrow jumping from place to place, being so random.
So I was like, there's another series that had something like that, and I can't remember right now. But I mean, yeah, because they did have inconsistency, because like the whole reason they had Darren Chris come on for the one Flash Supergirl crossover where it was like the music maestro or whatever,
Mhm.
was because they screwed up the love storylines between Barry and Iris and Mon-El and Kara.
Yeah.
And so they had to fix that. And they were like, hey, let's just have this like non-true villainous episode. He's more of an anti-hero. And we'll fix it this way.
Hmm.
Which I mean, that musical episode, I really liked that musical episode. But you could definitely tell it was them trying to like fix what they had done.
What's even worse is that they try and fix it in a crossover episode, which not everybody watches. Because remember those crossover episodes, they're like the 2-night premieres because one premieres on the Flash's date and the other premieres on Supergirl's date, and not a whole lot of people watch both of those shows, which is so annoying.
But at the same time, like it worked because the way that they wrote that episode would not have worked if it was a crossover episode and they just threw in this random guy. So like how they had Iris and Mon-El like being the star-crossed lovers
Mm-hmm.
in this alternate world. If you threw in a random guy or like all of a sudden made it that Iris was going for Cisco, like you would be like, that what is going on here, versus just like, oh yeah, okay, having, these two, they're like, hey, that's my person. Wait, why is my person going with your person? I feel like makes a better storyline than like wait, why are you've never been interested in her, that's never been hinted at before. And but I mean, I do also understand that crossover episodes, if they don't happen on the same night, are difficult, but I also think in an era where we have the streaming services where it gets put on the next day, it's easy to watch them back to back.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll be like the NCIS 3-episode crossover happened all on one night.
Mm-hmm.
But like my dad and I, we weren't going to stay up until 11 o'clock, to midnight or so to watch all 3 episodes.
Right.
So we might start it, but then we're not finishing it until later. So we might as well watch it all together when we can.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's also the thing with, if you're going to cross over between different series, is having that streaming opportunity, versus back then it was, you missed it, well, you got to wait for it to come back on later.
Yeah. That sucks.
All right, so now that we have discussed a bit what makes a spin-off series not the greatest, what are some, you said your favorite spin-off was Mandalorian. What are some others that you think are like top tier spin-off examples?
Loki was so good.
Yeah.
I had very low expectations for that show, and the way that they were able to develop Loki's character even more than they had already done in the Infinity Saga really impressed me. It kept me interested with Loki's character. It had a really good mystery. It paid off in the end and introduced the next big villain for the Marvel Universe, which was a very big surprise. I have nothing but praise for that entire show. Tom Hiddleston was still great as Loki, and I'm glad to have Owen Wilson in the MCU because I love that actor so much. It was really well written, very suspenseful, and they took like the goofiest parts of the Marvel comics, such as like Crokey, the little alligator Loki, and made him work in live action, which was really impressive. I was just very happy with that show overall. And
I would say my one biggest thing, and I really hope they don't do it, and I don't know if it's in the comics or not. Like I understand the whole romance, like I understand the connection between Loki and Sylvie, but I'm also like, you're the same person technically, like you're a variant of each other, but let's not go there.
what's really funny is not only is it a thing in the comics, it's also a thing in mythology, as Loki was always one of the, not only is he's the trickster god, but he's also the god of self-love, and he's been known to uses apparitions of himself to have fun. We'll just say that. So it's Loki. So I didn't actually mind it. It's in the comics. It works in Loki's character. I'm like, if anyone were to be in love with themselves, it would most definitely be Loki. So that's why I was okay with it.
Yeah. I mean, like at the same time too, it's like, no, Loki needs that person that like understands. Because at this point, this Loki isn't even the same one that was the the one that Thor, was becoming good friends and a good brother with Thor, because that one died.
Yeah.
This is a different variant. And so it's like, okay, well, we can't really have you connect with our Thor at the moment. I mean, we could, but then we'd
No,
have
that'll
to,
definitely happen in Kang Dynasty.
yeah,
I hope
probably.
so, at least, because I know Chris Hemsworth is taking a break from acting. And my theory is that in order to establish Kang as a really intimidating villain, I think Kang is going to have to kill Thor, which that leaves Chris Hemsworth to have a meaningful exit. And also it'll develop Loki's character more if, he meets his brother and it's Thor that dies this time and Loki gets the one to live. I think it would actually work very poetically. So that's my
Yes
theory.
and no. Just because, like, I feel like because, like, Loki knows that Thor is alive. I think if Loki were to lose, this Loki were to lose one more person, especially after losing, not Morbius, that's the wrong character, Wilson's character.
Oh yeah, Mobius.
It is more Mobius, not Morbius. Um, there's no R. Because he lost him when he re-entered after the timeline fractured.
Yeah, but they'll meet up in season 2. Like the season 2 trailer showed that they'll meet up again, which is fine.
But he's
Um,
also still missing Sylvie. And so I think if
yeah, that
Loki
is true.
loses another person, the way that they've been writing Loki, Loki might turn true dark. I don't
I don't
know.
know about.
But
I don't think so. I think that
because I think he would close himself off.
They've already done the villain Loki, though. I think they want to do the good guy.
Well,
We've
not
already had villain
necessarily
Loki for an entire
villain
saga.
villain dark, but like anti-hero dark. That's like they know what's right and wrong. They're trying to do good, make sure, kind of like Alphaba in Wicked, how like she's shown, everyone makes her the villain because that's how they make Glinda the good witch. But you see her still trying to help the flying monkeys and all the other creatures of Oz, but like she's got that like closed off, like she's not letting anybody else in except for the ones that she knows are still alive, like Fiero and Glinda. But she's not letting anybody else in. So I think, at least in the musical, if you've read the book, I know it's a bit darker and different. But I think if Loki were to lose Thor, he would not necessarily turn off the humanity, but make it so that he only cares about those that he knows are already still alive. So like Sylvie and Mobius, and he would make sure to like extra protect them. But everyone else, he'd be like, do you really need my help? Or are you just like trying to do something extra stupid and only use his, be that whole anti-hero?
Well, that doesn't
Dark.
technically make sense because Loki's trying to warn the entire multiverse of Kang's coming. So that would make no sense if he decided to just switch like that. Because that's
No, he would only switch like that if Thor dies, I'm saying.
I mean, I
So
get.
during Kang Dynasty.
But you also forget that this Loki variant doesn't know if Thor's alive or dead. What he saw up to he didn't see past Infinity War. All he saw was his death. He doesn't know what happens after that.
Yeah, but he knows that his Thor are still alive, or at least when he left it. And so I think if he found out, he has this idea that Thor is still alive, and so if he came back, then and then Thor dies in front of him, then he would in Kang Dynasty, that it would make him go anti-hero more than staying on the good person path.
Yeah, I could see him like going off on his own branch. Yeah.
So I will say, as far as ending our geek tangent on Loki, um going on to more good spin-offs. I don't know if you've seen the show 911 Lone Star. It is a spin-off of the NBC series 911. So 911 Lone Star is set in Austin, Texas. And that one is really good because this one is, both series are pretty inclusive on their characters, but this one they really tackle the important topics, and right off the bat too. It's not just, hey, we're a spinoff and here's to our parent show. It's also no, we have our own things, our own craziness down in Austin, Texas. One episode, I don't know the true earthly, I can't think of the word. I don't know if there's actually an active or a dormant volcano near Austin, Texas, but that was one episode. And I thought it led really well into some of the different characters, problems and their own storylines, and it gave a nod to the regular 911 because of all the crazy traumatic events that happen, but at the same time, it's staying true to itself and staying true to Austin, Texas, and keeping the characters who they are instead of being oh, we're gonna follow the main branch. And I think that's a really good way to go. And I will say too that 911 Lone Star wasn't really set up in regular 911. So no, it wasn't a backdoor pilot or anything.
Mhm.
It was hey, here's the pilot, here's this, we're spinning off. And they have had one crossover episode. And when the characters met, it was an instant click, and you're like, oh, yeah, those two definitely would be the troublemakers together. And you could see exactly why. And yeah, okay, they're similar, but they're also different. And without giving too much away about the series, they also used the events of real life when Texas went into the deep freeze last year, 2 years ago, whenever it was during the pandemic, when Texas actually froze over. And I thought that it was a really good job of the creators themselves keeping up with current events of the location that they're filming, and not just being oh, well, this is a hypothetical of what could happen in Austin, Texas. No, there was actually a freeze, so we know what's going on, and we're going to use that to put into our own storyline and show you that this could actually be happening in Texas here, and this is what the characters could be going through.
Mhm.
Which is a really good way of if the regular 911 series got canceled at any point, I don't see that happening for a few years. But if it did, 911 Lone Star could totally stand on its own 2 feet, and you wouldn't have to worry about it being canceled just because the original one was.
Right.
But yeah, I also think that, what was the other one that I was thinking? I don't remember. What other ones do you have, Carter?
Moon Knight, I think, is a great spin-off from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It perfectly introduces a new character while still feeling like it's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, even though it takes completely it's London and Egypt that it takes place in. But it introduces more of a supernatural side of the MCU, which is one of my favorite sides of the MCU that doesn't get explored much, like characters like Ghost Rider and Moon Knight and Blade. I'm really excited that part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Marvel Comics universe is being more explored, because I love horror movies, and seeing Marvel horror be introduced more is very exciting, because Marvel kind of got their start through horror comics like Tomb of Dracula, Werewolf by Night, and Strange Tales, which is kind of like their version of Tales from the Crypt. So it was really good, and I love Oscar Isaac as an actor. I think he's not underrated, but I think he's underappreciated. Like he's talked about, but he's not really given the recognition for being such a great actor. Like the way he switches from Stephen Grant to Mark Spector in that one episode when he's like staring at the sand and he just switches characteristics. It was so amazing to watch that. And I've never seen acting like that before. It was really, really impressive. And the CGI was great. The twist villain of Ammit being the true villain was really cool. I loved all the Egyptian mythology that they introduced, and it was just a really, really good show. Although different from the comic books, they've taken it in a different route. It's really exciting, and I hope we get season 2 after that cliffhanger.
Yeah. I hope that there is a season 2, because I don't think that was ever confirmed at any point.
Nope, it's not been confirmed yet, which makes me really, really sad, because I really hope it does, because they kind of need to solve the problem with, Khonshu taking over Mark Spector's body.
And coming out with
Jake Lockley.
Yep.
I'm really excited.
Geek tangent real quick, because I forgot to screenshot it, so I forgot to mention it. Peacock has canceled two new shows following in Netflix's footsteps. It was not Vampire Diaries, Vampire Academy, and One of Us is Lying, which both are also teen and young adult series, which, like Netflix, when they cancel that, I sit there and go, you realize that you're not going to be making any money, because all of a sudden all these young people are going to stop watching, and then their parents are going to be like, okay, well, you don't use it anyways, we don't use this, so we're going to get rid of it, and you're going to lose all this money. Geek tangent over on that. I'm just, there's a lot of people upset about both those, and rightly so. But yeah, I am still waiting for Disney and Marvel to be like, oh yeah, by the way, we're coming out with that, because I think they would be really stupid if they didn't. But I also want to know, because they've done it in the past, they're really good at making the trailers and then not telling you that a certain character is going to be in it until you see the movie. So I also wonder if any of that is going to happen, where all of a sudden we have Jake Lockley appear with Khonshu, but nobody else can see Khonshu.
Yeah, he's rumored to be the new Captain America movie, because the Serpent Society, who's a Moon Knight enemy and sometimes Captain America enemy, is going to be the main villains. And I'm like, I wish Serpent Society was saved from Moon Knight season 2, and then Captain America did Red Skull's daughter. That's fine.
They've done that where they, set something up. I mean, think of Hydra.
Yeah.
Technically, we thought Hydra was over after the first Avenger, Captain America First Avenger, and then psych, it's not over, because here it is in S.H.I.E.L.D., Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and here it is in Winter Soldier.
Hydra's always been reoccurring in Marvel Comics. They never go away. The saying, strike down one head to grow back,
So, but I'm just saying too that the serpents, could come back. So yeah. They could do a Moon Knight season 2 after one of the movies.
Yeah, that's totally fair. You're totally right. They could do that.
Yeah. Speaking of movie spin-offs, one of my favorites, and I know it's controversial, and I know the controversies with them, because I've talked about them before, is the Fantastic Beasts movies. And I understand the frustration with how they were titled, because I've run into that frustration with how American authors have titled some of their, um, I will say 20th century American authors have titled some of their works, and I'm like, this does not connect to what you just wrote whatsoever. So I do understand that frustration. But I do think that they did a really good job of setting up the characters and the conflicts of the times
Mm-hmm.
and setting it up so that you understood things that happened later in the Harry Potter movies. So,
Yeah.
like, even though Harry Potter was originally a book series, the fact that we can also set these characters up in the books, so we can set Newt Scamander up and Dumbledore up, we can go back and say, no, like I now see how this connects to that, and how, point A connects to point B, which ultimately leads to point Z.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they did a really good job of, like, not only showing us some of the different some of the different creatures, but also staying true to the characters that were already set up, while also saying, like, here's our own version of those characters. So, like, Dumbledore, they were like,
Yeah.
we're going to show you what you all really want with Dumbledore, how we know he's supposed to be, versus how our lovely esteemed author says that he should be.
I didn't even know it was an argument that Fantastic Beasts were a spinoff or not. I mean, of course they're a spinoff.
Yeah, I think, because the other part is people might think that they're a prequel, but I think if it was a Marauders series,
That would be
it
more
would
of
be more of a
a
prequel.
James and Lily Potter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, if we had the Marauders and, like, how we got into the Death Eaters and Voldemort, that would be more of a prequel than it would be a spinoff.
Yeah. So like Fantastic Beasts is like it's a spin-off, but the prequel is more of like the subtitle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's mostly a spin-off, but it's also a prequel.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if you think about shows like currently on the CW, The Winchesters
Mm-hmm.
is
That's a prequel.
about,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a prequel, but it's also a spinoff because it's showing us how technically Samuel, because Samuel is just getting introduced in episodes now as soon as it comes back this week. The day after this episode gets put out, the next episode is The Winchesters is supposed to come out. But, like, how Mary stopped being a hunter and how John learned about hunters and the hunting profession. And the Men of Letters, which were at the time that Supernatural introduced the Men of Letters and, like, the bunker and everything to do with Men of Letters, it was so out of the blue. And, like, I was like, what are you doing? Why are we trying to do this? But having it set up where Mary and John know about the Men of Letters,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, like, John's father was part of the Men of Letters, we're sitting there going, this makes so much more sense.
Mm-hmm.
And my best friend argues that John Winchester didn't know about hunting until after Mary died. But I also sat there and went, how would he know so much about hunting and, knowing who all these different people are if he
Right.
didn't know about it beforehand? So, like, at least some parts, because I feel like Samuel wouldn't have been Samuel being Mary's father, not Sammy, played by Jared Padalecki in Supernatural. Samuel, I don't think, would have hidden his profession from John whatsoever. So unless it was, like, a complete no contact, which I don't remember that being a thing, at least not, like, while they were dating or anything,
Mm-hmm.
like, that was something that I'm fairly certain John Winchester would know about the hunting profession, even if he didn't fully know as much as the show is saying that he does. But, so the argument for what is a spinoff and what's a prequel, I get the show that you said at the beginning, not Mandalorian,
Gotham.
Gotham. Thank you.
Yeah.
It is. I do think
It's a
it
prequel
is.
spinoff.
Yeah, but I feel like it leans more into like that prequel. So if we
Yeah.
have like a little Venn diagram, this circle is definitely the prequel circle is definitely bigger than it is the spinoff, but there is still that little overlap bit. All right. So, is there anything else that you would like to add tonight, Carter?
Yeah, why is Agatha getting a spinoff of all characters? Moon Knight season 2 hasn't been announced, but Agatha gets a spinoff. Like I saw the announcement, I was like,
Know about Agatha after WandaVision.
yeah, I know it's fine because like Wanda quote unquote dies in Multiverse of Madness, that's not a spoiler. That movie's been out for like 6 months. You haven't seen it, go see it. Like I get it. Agatha is like set up for like the mystical side of the MCU, but I'm like, I would prefer a Wong show because he's a character I care about more than Agatha. And like, I was not excited for Loki when I got it announced. So this will probably work the same way it did for Agatha. We're just repeating history and I'll end up loving it.
I think too with Wong, because I think everybody wants a Wong show, is that his is going to be more of like the Marvel shorts that we
Yeah.
used to get. And I think if Marvel did like how Baby Groot got a bunch of Groot shorts that came out as like a little mini series, I think if Wong got that series, especially with his new best friend that he met in She-Hulk. Oh, what's her name?
I don't remember her name. Yeah, but
But
yeah.
if there was an episode with them or a couple episodes where it's those two together and he's using his powers and she's just in the background like, hey, you want a martini or
Yeah.
margarita, whatever. And
I know that Wong is like the new Nick Fury, like he's popping up everywhere to keep everything connected. But I still would have preferred a Wong show. But it'll be a Loki situation where I'll probably end up loving Agatha by the end of her show. And plus it's Catherine Hahn, since I love that actress so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I have.
Cool. Well, as always on Raving Geeks, we like to end our episodes with some geeky recommendations, whether this be movies, TV shows, music, video games, anything geeky, or something that we're totally into and think that needs to be shared. So, Carter, what recommendations do you have for us this week?
I have 2 recommendations. One's new and one's old. Well, kind of old. My new one is The Last of Us, which is coming out. It's based off of a video game, and it's a post-apocalyptic TV show about plant zombies. And it's really, really good so far. It's a near perfect adaptation of the game. And by this recording, episode 2 will have been out. So I'm very excited for that. And for anyone who's interested in Stephen King, go watch The Outsider on HBO Max. It was a great show that premiered during COVID, and it didn't get enough attention. It's a great horror suspense TV show. I just recommended it to my dad and his girlfriend, and they both love the show. And it just kind of reminded me, I was like, wow, that show was really good. So I'm putting it out there as a recommendation.
I recommend basically everything that we have said throughout this entire show, even the ones that we both say aren't the greatest examples of spin-offs, because they do all have their own good points, even if they're not the greatest examples of spin-offs. But my main ones are watching Alex Rider if you have Amazon Prime Video, especially if you're a fan of the book and the first movie. They do a really good job of following the book. Do a better job of following the book. Like the original movie with Alex Pettyfer, did a good job of following the book, but with the Alex Rider being a series with episodes, it can dive a little bit deeper. Although I will say the one part that I am mad about that didn't happen in the series is his whole fight with the jellyfish. I'm really upset about that one. But the other one I recommend, 911 Lone Star. Especially if you're looking for anything that has LGBTQ storylines, there is that storyline. Both there's a trans character who the actor is actually trans himself, and then there is a gay storyline, and it's set in Austin, Texas, which is gorgeous. And my final one is actually one that's been out for a couple years. Dope Sick with Michael Keaton, Will Poulter. I can't remember her name now, but I could picture her perfectly. But it was really good and really shows like how the whole epidemic of the opiate crisis really started, and how everything has transpired since, and all the different pawns in it. Even if some of the pawns were completely fictional, they represented the people who were part of it. And like Will Poulter does a fantastic job. I think Rosario Dawson is also in it, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
And Michael Keaton does a really good job as well. I mean, he's a phenomenal actor. So yeah, those are my recommendations.
Yeah, I keep
Um,
forgetting to watch it. My friend constantly
it's-
reminds me, he's like, Carter, you like all these great actors. You should watch this show. And I keep forgetting to watch it. So this recording should help me.
I will say that if you are not a fan of like time jumps and multiple storylines happening at once, you may not be a fan of it because it does jump around a bit, but it tells you when it jumps. Like it has this little like timeline when it jumps, and it'll like spin to 1997 or whatever, and it'll tell you where it is, and you can figure it all out. It's easy enough to follow, but if you are a person who's not the biggest fan of that, then just be warned about it. But it is a really good show, and it makes a lot more sense with time jumps than Dunkirk did, because Dunkirk literally took me until the timelines collided for me to realize it was different timelines,
Mhm.
even though it said it at the beginning of the movie. But yeah. So if you guys want to reach out to us and give us some episode topics or question of the week, or just want to like talk to us about any of our topics that we've discussed in any of our episodes, you can find us on Twitter and TikTok at Raving Geeks for both. If you send us a message on TikTok, we can see it, but we can't reply, but we can reply to all comments. And we do try to reply to all of your comments on there, especially when there's a lot of you, but we love every single one of you who listens and interacts with us. So, as always, I have been Hope Gooderl along with my co host,
I'm Carter Sally.
and we hope that you guys have a great weeky and stay geeky, y'all.
See
See
you guys
ya.
later.